Hi everyone, Big Finny Gaines Tano here, the internet's busiest music nerd. And it's time for a review of the new Full of Hell album, Full of Hell and Merzbow. This is the latest full-length LP, I believe the third full-length LP, from extreme metal and punk act Full of Hell. This is the first time I'm reviewing them, however I am well aware of their previous LPs, and I didn't really review these albums in their own videos because I didn't really have that much to say about them. I like that the band creates a really chaotic blend of hardcore punk and sludge metal, grindcore, as well as power violence, but I never found their sound to be that bold, memorable, or distinct, even though it is hellishly loud. Their riff writing never really stuck with me either, though personally I do admire the band for being consistent and prolific and sticking to their guns. But what grabbed my attention about this new record is that they seem to be taking a pretty ambitious risk with the collaboration they name this album after, Full of Hell and Merzbow. Infamous Japanese noise artist whose output is relentlessly abrasive and prolific. And Full of Hell are big fans of noise. They have a series of EPs they've dropped over the years where they indulge in noise music a bit, and this is one of their shirts. It's just a Merzbow album cover. Given that their experimentations with noise thus far have been on the shorter side, and they are big fans of the artists that they are collaborating with on this record, I thought it would be interesting to see how things kind of panned out on this release. And this record is essentially 11 tracks, 24 minutes of sonic hell, eardrum scraping fury. This thing has a great recording and mix, the best recording and mix I think Full of Hell has worked with thus far. The guitars are really heavy, the bass is nice and the vocals are absolutely gruesome and upfront and in your face. The drums are just clear as a bell, very punchy, and the performances all over this LP are so precise, yet they don't feel mechanical or robotic or anything like that. There's just a lot of kinetic energy to the playing on this thing. It's just so visceral, it's so lively. Even before we talk about Merzbow's inclusion on this album, Full of Hell is sounding better as a band. The playing is more intense, and they find some interesting ways to work dissonance into their riffs to add just like a subtle layer of melody to make things just a little bit catchier. They manage to create some pretty memorable moments in tracks that even just have a 30-second or a 40-second runtime. But even the longer tracks do have their stickier spots, like Thrum in the Deep, which has the most killer riff of any track on this entire LP, or Blue Litmus. I love the slowed down, crushing riffs at the end of this track, as well as the kind of noisy freakouts in the midst of the hard-hitting riffs at the start of this song. Jun, 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 jun. And the closing track on this LP, along with another one earlier in the track list, managed to incorporate horns into the blast beats and the heavy riffs on this thing. And not really in so much of a beautiful way, though these horns do complement the chord progression of an earlier track in this track listing. On this particular song, the horns really just contribute to the extremity of the song. Merzbow's contributions to this record sound, much of the time, incredibly subtle, and I think that's going to end up disappointing some people going into this LP, since it does feel like Full of Hell is making a big deal of this collaboration, just naming the album after the collaboration itself. The truth is, while Merzbow's input is there on a lot of these songs and is audible, it's not like Full of Hell relies on him like a crutch to really make these tracks. A lot of the time, what Merzbow does just feels kind of like a side dish or a contribution, which is fine. Full of Hell's songs move at such a frantic pace, and they are so chaotic already that much of what Merzbow does just feels like it's just subtly placed within these flurries of drums and guitars and vocals. You may hear some subtly placed feedback shots or distortion walls or weird noisy loops laced into these songs, and even though it's not really upfront and in your face, it does contribute to the intensity of these tracks overall, and I think just adds a little bit more density, a bit more detail, and makes Full of Hell's music a bit more interesting than it usually is, in my opinion. There are moments where Merzbow's contributions really stick out, like on the song Blue Litmus, where I can only assume that some of the just noisy, distorted feedback shots on that track are brought by him. There are tracks where maybe the riffs are slower, there's a lot more space to fill, and you hear Merzbow just bringing forward some shrill, ear-piercing noise just to make the song just even more abrasive. There's the track Raise the Great Wall, which really just kind of seems like a 2-minute, brittle, harsh noise piece that transitions the album from one track to another. And even though it just kind of feels like an interlude, I think it adds to the personality of the record, the character of the record, and I think the song does a good job of just making Full of Hell's vocals and drums contribute to that stagnant, challenging, torturous vibe that you get from some good noise music. This track affects the flow of the album in a big way, as do some of the longer tracks on the back end of this LP. Truth be told, even though this album is heavy, it's extreme, it's noisy, it's kind of varied. There are songs that really just test patience. There are tracks that fly by in 30 seconds and are maybe some of the most disgusting music I've heard this year. Full of Hell just piles on the blood and the guts and the entrails on numerous tracks here. Though I do like some of the slower tracks on here, like High Fells, because the horn flutters on that song, the very epic, heavy guitar chords just are a note of accessibility that I think the album needed, just for the sake of diversity and just a nice change of pace. And even though there are songs in this track list here that I think sort of defy recollection, and there are tracks that just quickly segue into others as if they're one cohesive song, just songs going by in a flash, much of this record is sticking with me pretty hard. Again, Full of Hell is sounding better and more creative as a band themselves, and Merzbow, together with them, even though his contributions may seem very simple, they are incredibly effective, and I think help Full of Hell do what they've already done pretty well better. I'm feeling a strong 7 to a light 8 on this thing. Transition. If you've given this record a listen, what did you think of it? Did you love it? Did you hate it? Why? What do you think I should review next? And that's it. Anthony Fantano, Full of Hell, Merzbow, forever.